Jill Duggar is speaking out against her parents in a new series called Shiny Happy People Duggar Family Secrets that uncovers how her parents tried to hide her brother Josh's past, how she and her sister Jessa felt pressured to defend her brother when everything came out about him, how she was tricked by her dad into signing into more seasons of their show, plus how she felt pressured into filming the birth of her son, and how she never saw any money for the 7.5 years she was filmed. It's actually crazy, and the series is so sick. It's so heartbreaking, and I recently talked about how the series was about to come out and how slowly over the years more and more Duggar children are speaking out about what it was like to grow up not only on television but in this cult-like environment their parents created for them because they followed a man named Bill Gothard's teachings. I just finished the series. It was 4 episodes and was incredibly disturbed by the stories told by many former members of Bill Gothard's IBLP teachings, which stands for the Institute of Basic Life Principles, which is what the Duggars followed. The people in the documentary, aside from Jill and her husband, include Jim Bob's sister, her daughter Amy, former family friends, journalist, YouTuber Fundy Friday, and former members of IBLP. In regards to the Duggar family specifically, there's a few major parts in the docuseries that stand out that Jill opened up about for the first time. Jill wanted to be the one to tell the story about her family, from how her parents met to where they are now. She said in the docuseries that she was not very close with her family, but I will say that recently her sister did post on Instagram this group photo of some of the girls together, and her mom was present for this, but in the docuseries she said she wasn't very close with them. When describing her parents, she said that her parents believe that you should have as many kids as God will allow you to have, even though both sets of grandparents told her parents that they shouldn't, and they always worried about Michelle's health. She said her dad worked 3 jobs to support their family, and they would go to a lot of kids eat free places to get by before her dad went into politics. When her dad was involved in politics, a photo of the family went around, and this was how the family ended up getting discovered by Discovery Network. They were fascinated by the size of their family, so they did a little documentary, and later it turned into multiple documentaries and then the show. And in the beginning, Jim Bob only agreed to it if they did not edit out their faith from this documentary or the show. Throughout the docuseries that just came out, they talked about how Jim Bob was very inspired by Bill Gothard and brought Michelle into it. She went to a seminar after they were first married, and Amy, who is Jim Bob's niece, says that with the amount of babies that the Duggars had and the show, they kind of just became the poster child for IBLP. The Duggar children being homeschooled is also a huge discussion in this series, and it isn't because they want to say that homeschooling is bad, it's because what the kids were specifically being taught while homeschooled was not actual educational material. Bill Gothard had created his own advanced training institute. It was called ATI, which is a homeschool curriculum that takes everything he was teaching in his seminars, and he had turned it into a quote-unquote curriculum for families to teach their children. And Jill said that her parents got into it because they wanted to protect their kids, and this was supposed to be the key to them being good parents and making sure their kids would turn out right. And this whole organization, IBLP, was promising parents that their kids would turn out amazing if they taught them ATI at home. They also talked about Josh Duggar in this docuseries and how he was seen as this golden boy on this reality show. But then it quickly went downhill once an anonymous letter was written about him to the Oprah Winfrey Show, and they then reported it to the child abuse hotline, and news broke out to the public about what was going on behind closed doors in the Duggar household. In Touch magazine was able to obtain a decade-old police report detailing Josh's dark past that the Duggars tried to bury. It then came out that the victims of his crimes were some of his own sisters. Jill was then asked if she remembers when Josh was sent away from home, and she said that this is really hard for her to talk about, and her husband says that they wish nobody had ever found out about any of this. Her husband says that she shared these things with her husband in confidence when they were married and never thought the world would have to know about this. And a childhood friend of Jim Bob's named Jim Holt and his wife were interviewed in this docuseries and talked about knowing the family forever. Jim Holt had grown up with Jim Bob, and they had known Josh since he was a baby, and he even dated their eldest daughter, and he had the intentions to marry her. They were dating at the time the police report was made about what Josh was doing to his sisters, and Jim Bob ended up going to Jim Holt and telling him what Josh had done, and They said that it started when he was 12 and he was now 15 dating their daughter. And he also admitted that they weren't even going to tell them at all. Michelle admitted that they were just going to keep this whole thing a secret and Josh was going to confess all of this to their daughter once, they were married, which is crazy that they were going to have him keep this sick secret to himself. And this was something he was just going to tell his wife once the papers were signed and she couldn't really get out of it. But they ended up taking Josh down to the station to confess what he had done, and because the guy at the station was a friend of Jim Bob's, he only gave Josh a warning and they didn't take him in. But the family decided to send Josh away at this time to Bill Gothard's facility for troubled boys. Amy Duggar said at the time that Michelle and Jim Bob told her that Josh was helping build homes for families, and they later were going to tell People magazine that Josh was ministering. But they decided against that lie, so they checked him out and brought him back home and did nothing else. Jill says that following the news coming out, it was very important to her dad to protect the show and make sure that TLC still wanted things to go on, and her dad would talk to producers about how things were going to be handled. And as far as recovery and damage control, Jill said that her and her sister Jessa felt the weight of the situation fall onto them. That's when they were interviewed by Megyn Kelly. She said that they had a family meeting and her dad's PR guy was the one that was there with them, and he's the one that set the whole interview up in hopes that TLC would be cool with continuing on with the show despite everything going on with Josh. So that's what happened. Her and Jessa came out as victims of Josh and spoke out, saying that nobody asked them to speak out and really downplayed the situation. Jill said that she wished she hadn't done the interview at all. She felt obligated to help her brother at the time, and her husband even spoke for her during this part of the interview that they did for the docuseries and says that he would not call it voluntary that she did this interview and that she was basically called on to do it, to carry the family through this situation. And this is really interesting because on my last video, somebody commented shaming Jessa for this moment right here, where she defended Josh in the Megyn Kelly interview. And here we are seeing that these girls felt like they had to do this. This is not something that they wanted to do. Now, this wasn't the only news to come out about Josh. He was also exposed for having been on the Ashley Madison website, known as the site to have an affair, and he was accused of having been with someone while his wife was pregnant. Jim Bob's sister said that this all could have been taken care of in a different way if he had just woken up and realized that his son needed help. And they literally showed a clip of Michelle saying at that time that she doesn't need to talk to Josh, she just needs to talk to their Heavenly Father. The show ended up getting canceled, but Jill and Jessa ended up getting a spin-off show called Jill and Jessa Counting On. Jill said that she didn't want to, but she felt like she couldn't disobey her parents or bad things would happen to her, and she admits feeling really taken advantage of in the filming of the show. She said the umbrellas of authority were ingrained in her since childhood, and this is why she felt like she couldn't go against her parents. Because in IBLP, you were taught that children are managers of the home and they are below the wife is below the husband, and the husband is below Christ. And she said that IBLP and the teachings drew in people like her dad who want control and foster this cult-like environment. She's literally calling her family a cult. And she goes on to further describe how her dad really controlled their lives. She admits that the day before her wedding, she signed a contract and it was on the kitchen table. Her dad was like, hey, when you guys get a chance, I just need you guys to sign this thing really quickly. Like whoever would walk by, he was like, hey, can you just sign this? And it wasn't this casual document. The actual document happened to be a contract for them all to be signing their life away to film the show for the next 5 years. And she had no idea what it was. She said that they had business meetings and all of that, but it was never with the kids. And so she was never part of any of those meetings. And she goes on to say that when it came to her giving birth to her first child, the production company asked her, hey, your birth is coming up. We know you're about to pop. We're going to be there filming, right? And she was like, no, I actually don't want you guys there at all. And she said that they were shocked that she was saying that. But there ended up being a whole 2-hour Jill's special delivery episode. Her husband says that they basically lost the battle to that one, and the production team had got the footage that they wanted to produce that episode. She said the production team gave them cameras to film with and tripods and all that, so during her birth, they had to basically film to make them happy. And the worst part about all of this was that it seems as though the kids were never actually really compensated properly for being a part of this. Jill said after her son was born, she asked TLC to pay them enough to at least cover the out-of-pocket costs for her son's birth, but they only agreed to pay the family, which meant her dad, and they told her to take it up with him. And Jill admits that the whole time of being a star, she was never paid a distribution. She never received a payout, no cash, no check, and said that for 7.5 years of her adult life, she was never paid. She said it was when she was living in El Salvador on a mission trip with her husband and new baby for 10 months that TLC had come to her and said, hey, you need to do this shoot for the show. You and Jessa, your names are on the show. You need to come back and do this. And she said no for the first time because she wasn't in America. And they basically had pulled the contract out and said, well, you actually have to. And her dad sent her the obligations that she had, and she realized this is what she signed the day before she got married and that she had been tricked into signing. But Jill and her husband then said that they wanted to speak directly to TLC, and her dad's publicist was like, no, you can't, because the contract is not with you. It is through your dad, and I'm his representative, so you can't speak to TLC unless I'm present. Her dad did end up trying to make a compromise in some sort of way. He said that he was going to be giving a lump sum to the older kids, but in order to receive that money, you would have to sign another contract with her dad to basically agree to be filmed forever. And they decided then that they were going to walk away from doing the show entirely and not take any money from her dad. And as much as her dad has said the reason they did the show was because it was their own version of a ministry, a way to spread their faith, it really wasn't for that. And what it did to their kids is so sad. And the fact that they still have young kids at home, it's crazy. And another thing about all of this is when Jill talks about being homeschooled, she said that she remembers going to the conferences and how people that were there, the thing that they were afraid of the most was public education because they thought it would lead to brainwashing. And the Advanced Training Institute, which was basically what they were learning from, included things called wisdom books. There were 54 books, and each week you would learn a new category within a book. And at the end of the year, you would just start all over, and that was a new grade. And a lot of former members of IBLP in this docuseries basically said this was not an education. This was not a proper education at all. Even though Bill Gothard promised that his program was equivalent to a high school diploma with a law degree and a pre-medical degree, that was not the case at all. In reality, they were not getting a good education. And some of the things that they would do in school was like circle the inappropriate outfit. Like, what? Why are we learning how to shame in quote unquote school? But as of 2021, this is no longer being sold as a form of homeschool education, and it's being just called a Bible study. But this is one of the reasons people say that Anna is standing by Josh, because she wasn't formally educated and she was taught only these things growing up, and she grew up very similarly to the Duggars. And in this docuseries, they touch on that, and they say it's probably because the things that the girls are taught their whole lives living in this world is that you shall not disobey your husband. No matter what you're going through in your marriage, no matter what happens, whatever your husband does, you are to just stay by his side and be happy and be perfect and make sure the kids are okay, and you will go to heaven. And if you do anything opposite from that, you will be going the opposite way. It was just so fear-based. The whole thing was to just scare the daylights out of everyone into not acting out and pretending to be a perfect human. Lots of suppressing emotion was taught. And it's just so sad how some of these kids had to grow up. Jill talks about the rules within her family and how the older kids were to take care of the younger, and she was assigned a group of siblings that she was in charge of, that she was basically raising, and that was her job. And every time that her mom had a new baby, that baby was basically assigned to a daughter that did not have a buddy yet. And that was now her responsibility to watch over this new sibling. And Jill said that, having your own voice and saying no about things, that was just not allowed at all in their family. I mean, this whole thing just really breaks my heart for the kids in this family. And luckily, some of those who have left the house have spoken out about the realizations that they've had and how they have been trying to undo what has been taught to them. But that is a good chunk of what was discussed in this docuseries. It's truly wild to hear about all that has happened over the years with this family that people once were very much obsessed with. It's just really crazy to hear all that really went on behind the scenes. And I want to know if you guys saw the docuseries, what you think about what Jill had to say, especially about her dad. That is crazy. Some of the stuff that was going on there, and the fact that she was not paid is so freaking upsetting. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye, guys.